December 18, 1941. 24,000 feet above the snow-draped coastline of Hokkaido, Japan. The thin metal skin of the B-17 shivers in the sub-zero wind, each vibration echoing through the bomber like a heartbeat. Frost webs across the plexiglass nose, and inside the bombardier's compartment, Lieutenant Frank Delmar wipes a gloved thumb across the sighting window, just enough to glimpse the black coastline crawling into view below. The crew has been in radio silence for hours. Their flying Fortress, B-17C, Dakota Queen, is one of the first American heavy bombers to ever enter Japanese airspace. No escort, no formation, just a single steel giant punching through a sky the Japanese never believed it could reach. Behind Delmar, Captain Robert Hale, the aircraft commander, adjusts the trim wheel with slow, deliberate movements. He's been awake for nearly 20 hours, and his eyes burn with exhaustion. But his mind is clear. He can feel the Fortress settling into its run, the engines thundering evenly at 2,300 revolutions per minute. The Japanese thought this was impossible. 2 years earlier, their officers had openly mocked the American Flying Fortress, claiming no bomber that large could fly so far, so high, or hit with any meaningful accuracy. They saw the B-17 as propaganda and American bluff. But now, as Hale's crew levels off for their first approach, the truth is screaming toward Japan on 4 Wright Cyclone engines. In the top turret, Sergeant Miles Grady scans the horizon through a rotating arc of glass. His breath fogs the gun sight as he mutters, "Still nothing. No fighters, no flak." The absence is unnerving. Japan's early war confidence had been absolute. Their commanders boasted that no foreign aircraft could penetrate their airspace, certainly not a lumbering American heavy bomber. Their intelligence officers dismissed reports of the B-17's range as absurd, claiming that any Western aircraft appearing over Japan could only be launched from carriers or suicide missions. Yet here the Fortress is. Down in the battery of Tokyo Bay, a sentry peers through his binoculars and frowns at the dark silhouette overhead. It's too big for a reconnaissance plane, too fast for a transport. He hesitates for a fatal moment before pulling the alarm. Up in the bomber's radio compartment, Technical Sergeant Henry Ortiz hears the distant wail below, air raid sirens rising through the cold air like phantom screams. Ortiz doesn't break radio silence. His fingers drum the cold metal of the table. "We woke him up," he says under his breath. The air over Japan changes instantly. Below them, the coastline erupts in frantic motion. Searchlights snapping on, white cones swiping across the sky. Thin ribbons of flak begin to climb upward, uncertain at first, like groping hands that don't know what they're reaching for. Captain Hale keeps his voice calm. "Easy, boys. They never believed we could get this far. Let's show 'em what a fortress can really do." Frank Delmar crouches over the Norden bomb site. Frost gathers on his oxygen mask as he whispers check after check. Altitude, speed, wind drift. The legendary American device the Japanese dismissed as gimmick technology settles into its final calculations. The plane is steady. The crosshairs drift toward a small rail junction outside Sapporo, an early war logistics artery Japan thought untouchable. "Bomb bay doors open," Hale orders. A tremor shudders through the aircraft as the massive steel doors fold outward into the freezing air. The sudden drag yanks the bomber slightly to port. Miles Grady swings the top turret. "Contact. Fighters. 9 o'clock high." 3 slate-gray Nakajima Ki-27s arc toward them, sunlight glinting off their wings. They approach cautiously, almost confused, none of them expecting to see a 4-engine American bomber this deep in their own sky. Grady grins despite the cold. Oh, they're curious. Real curious. Below him, Corporal Eddie Vickers, manning the waist gun, racks the charging handle and leans into the open window. The wind tears at his goggles. He feels the raw Arctic air bite into his cheeks. The Japanese fighters close in, forming up like sharks circling a whale they're not sure they can kill. This moment, this single instant, marks the clash between two worlds. One built on arrogance, the other on steel. Inside the cockpit, Hale's voice is steady. "Hold them off. Delmar. Stand by to drop." The Ki-27s dive. Tracer fire streaks through the sky, red needles slicing past the fortress tail. The bomber shakes under the impact of small-caliber rounds. But the B-17 does not break. Vickers opens fire. Grady follows a split second later. The sky erupts with the brutal chatter of .50 caliber machine guns, an American storm answering a Japanese challenge. In the bomb site, Delmar's target drifts perfectly into place. Steady, steady. Another burst of flak blooms beneath them, black clouds rising too slow, too late. Delmar pulls the release. Toggles away. The fortress jumps upward as 2,000 pounds of steel and explosives fall free. The bombs whistle down toward the frozen rail junction, silent to the Japanese soldiers staring up in disbelief, loud as thunder to the American crew watching from above. The first explosion blossoms like a dirty orange flower. Then a second. Then a third. Ortiz exhales a breath he didn't know he was holding. Captain Hale glances over the smoking coastline, and for the first time since takeoff, his fatigue cracks into a grim smile. Japan underestimated the fortress, he says quietly. They won't make that mistake again. Outside, the Ki-27s regroup for another pass, but now their caution is gone. They've seen enough. They know this is no bluff, no myth. This is a new reality. One America has brought directly to their doorstep. And the fortress turns toward its escape route, engines roaring through the icy Japanese sky. 24,000 feet above Hokkaido, the Dakota Queen claws southward, engines thundering against the wind. The Japanese fighters trail them, but the moment of hesitation, those first stunned seconds when the Ki-27 pilots realized the aircraft they mocked was real, has already cost them the intercept. Captain Hale tilts the fortress into a shallow turn, squeezing every knot of speed from the cyclones. They're hanging back. Grady calls from the turret. I think we scared the hell out of him. Don't flatter yourself, Ortiz replies over the interphone. They just realized we're not supposed to exist up here. He's right. The Japanese pilots circle at a cautious distance, as if trying to make sense of what they're seeing. A bomber of this size, for engines, immense wings, heavy guns, should not have crossed the Pacific. Not in their understanding of American capabilities. Not according to their intelligence briefings. And certainly not at this altitude. The B-17 was never supposed to reach Japan. Not according to the men in Tokyo who studied American aircraft design. Not according to the officers who had assured the emperor that the Pacific was a shield, not a vulnerability. Japan's war planners believed distance itself would defend the home islands. They laughed when American newspapers claimed the flying fortress could cross oceans and strike with surgical accuracy. Yet here it is. Above the gunner's shoulder, a blue-gray Ki-27 tries another approach. It darts inward, then pulls back, like a man hesitating to touch a hot stove. Vickers bristles. Either attack or go home, you damn buzzards. Grady laughs short and sharp. They're trying to figure out who screwed up the math. But the danger is far from over. The fortress may have surprised Japan, but it is still alone. Out over the endless Pacific, the Dakota Queen has no escort, no support, no margin for error. One engine failure, one lucky flak hit, one determined fighter, and the bomber becomes a tomb sinking into icy water. And the Japanese are beginning to understand something new. This machine, this impossible beast, could come back with hundreds more. Far below, at a small airbase near Asahikawa, ground crews scramble to ready faster interceptors, Nakajima Ki-43 Hayabusas. The base commander shouts orders, papers flying from his clipboard as mechanics rush to fuel aircraft that had been sitting cold only minutes earlier. Their early confidence is gone, replaced by urgency, and something close to fear. Up in the Dakota Queen, Captain Hale checks the fuel gauges again. The needles tremble, but they are still where they should be. Hold this course, he tells co-pilot Lieutenant James Rowe, who looks 10 years older than he did at takeoff. Rowe nods, knuckles white around the yoke. We still making history? He asks with a forced smile. We're still alive, Hale answers. That's history enough. Below deck, Delmar finishes securing the bomb site, fingers trembling from adrenaline. The rail junction, once considered safe by Japanese planners, is now a smoking crater. The first direct American blow against Japanese infrastructure. A blow delivered by an aircraft the Japanese never believed could reach them. He climbs up into the cockpit, pulling off his frost-stiffened gloves. "Target destroyed," he reports simply. "Multiple secondaries." Hale nods but keeps his eyes forward. "Good work, Lieutenant. Now let's get this bird home." But home is thousands of miles away, and Japan is no longer underestimating them. In Tokyo, the news spreads with shocking speed. Staff officers crowd around radio intercept desks. A shaken communications operator tries to steady his voice as he repeats the report. "American heavy bomber spotted over Hokkaido. For engine. High altitude. Likely the aircraft referred to by U.S. sources as Flying Fortress. Air defenses engaged. Target appears to be," he swallows, "a domestic rail line." A colonel slams his fist onto the table. "Impossible. No U.S. aircraft has that range." Another officer shakes his head slowly. "Then our assumptions about America are wrong." The room falls silent. Japan had spent years studying the United States, believing it understood its enemy. They believed Americans were soft, easily intimidated, technologically inferior. What they saw this morning contradicted all of it. Back in the cockpit, the fighters finally commit. 3 Ki-27s arc downward in a coordinated strike, engines screaming as they dive out of the sun. "Here they come," Grady shouts. The fortress rocks violently as the first bursts of machine gun fire rake the fuselage, cutting through the thin metal like claws. A round punches through the radio compartment, grazing Ortiz's sleeve and spraying sparks. "I'm good," he shouts, ducking back into cover. Vickers fires a blistering burst out the waist window. Tracers carve glowing arcs through the sky. 1 Ki-27 rolls to avoid the fire, too late. The .50 cal slams into its wing root, and the fighter spirals downward trailing smoke. "That's one," Vickers yells, whooping into the icy wind. Another fighter streaks past the tail, missing by inches. Tail gunner Harold Stone opens up with a thunderous stream of fire. "I got him locked. Stay steady, Skip, steady." Hale holds the bomber level, trusting his gunners. Stone's rounds chew into the fighter's tail section. The Ki-27 wobbles, then peels away, limping toward the coast. But the third fighter makes a bold move. It dives directly beneath the fortress, looking for the bomber's blind spot. Hale sees the maneuver and curses. "Grady! He's coming up under the nose. I see him. Damn, he's fast." The Japanese pilot surges upward, banking on the B-17's reputation for slow maneuvering. His plan is simple. Rise into the bomber's underbelly and rake it from nose to tail. But he doesn't know the fortress as well as he thinks. Below the cockpit, the secret defensive gun, the belly position Japan barely acknowledged in its intelligence briefings, is waiting. Corporal Lewis Grant, manning the tunnel gun, squeezes the trigger. The blast is deafening. A boiling stream of tracers unloads into the climbing fighter. The Ki-27 jerks, shudders, and bursts into flame. It veers off and plunges toward the cold sea. The crew erupts in cheers. But Hale does not. He stares ahead, voice low. "This was a scouting mission for them," he says. "Next time, they'll send real interceptors." Rowe nods grimly. "And next time, they'll know exactly what we can do." The aircraft shudders as it banks southward again, cutting back toward the sea, toward escape, toward the long, freezing flight home. Hale glances once more at the smoldering coastline. Japan laughed at the flying fortress. This morning they stopped laughing. The Dakota Queen pushes southward, leaving the frost-bitten mountains of Hokkaido behind as the Pacific opens below. An endless, steel-blue void. The bomber's engines drone with a steady, reassuring rhythm, but every man aboard knows one truth. They're not safe. Not yet. Not by a long shot. Captain Hale scans the sky, searching for new threats. If the Japanese scrambled faster interceptors, Ki-43s or even early Zeros, they'd appear soon. And if they did, the fortress wouldn't get away as easily. "Fuel check," Hale orders. Lieutenant Rowe leans toward the gauges. For a moment he says nothing, just watches the needles tremble in their housings. "We're on the edge," Ro finally says. "If we get jumped again, or if we take a hit to the mains." Hale finishes the unspoken truth. "We won't make it home." The crew doesn't need the reminder. They've been listening to the engines too closely, feeling every vibration, every cough, every shudder. A single mechanical failure out here isn't an inconvenience, it's a death sentence. In the radio compartment, Ortiz finally breaks silence just long enough to send a coded burst. Nothing more than a simple confirmation that the raid occurred. No coordinates, no full report. Just enough for the U.S. command to know. The fortress reached Japan and returned fire. Ortiz leans back, chest rising and falling with the slow release of tension. Message away. They'll know we're alive. At least for now. Below, tens of thousands of feet beneath the bomber's steady rumble, Japan is reeling. At the Asahikawa Air Station, the first surviving Ki-27 pilot lands in a smoking, bullet-scarred fighter. Ground crews rush toward him. His canopy pops open, and he practically falls onto the wing, trembling from cold and shock. Officers swarm him, shouting questions. What aircraft was it? How many engines? How many guns? The pilot's eyes are wide, dazed. "It was a fortress," he whispers. "A flying fortress." The officers stare. They've heard the American name, of course. They dismissed it as exaggerated boasting. A product of American newspapers, always bragging, always inflating their capabilities. But the Ki-27 pilot continues. "It had guns everywhere. I fired. Hit it. But it would not fall. It kept climbing. Higher. Higher than we could reach." Another officer steps forward, demanding clarification. "Impossible. American bombers cannot fly that high." The pilot grips his flight suit with shaking hands. "Then tell that to the one that destroyed our rail line." The officer opens his mouth and closes it again. Nothing to say. The impossible already happened. Up in the Dakota Queen, Corporal Eddie Vickers pulls off his oxygen mask and rubs frozen condensation from his cheeks. His hands are still shaking, though he'll deny it for the rest of his life. "Never seen fighters behave like that," he mutters into the interphone. "Like they weren't sure what we were." "They weren't," Grady says from the top turret. "That's the whole point." Stone's voice crackles from the tail gun. "Commander Hale, enemies not tailing us anymore. They turned back." Hale exhales, letting his shoulders drop just slightly. "They're not giving up," he says. "They're regrouping." He points at the empty horizon. "They'll be back with faster planes. Fighters that can reach our altitude." Ro glances sideways. "And if they do?" Hale doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Several hundred miles away in Tokyo, in the darkened halls of the Imperial Japanese Army Air Staff, arguments erupt like artillery. Maps unfurl across tables. Pencils slam. A Colonel tears open a file marked American long-range aviation capacity and starts scrawling furious notes in the margins. A general paces in front of his staff. "America wasn't supposed to be able to strike us directly," he growls. "Our entire war plan is built on that assumption." A younger officer clears his throat. "Sir, with respect, perhaps our assumptions were wrong." The general stops mid-step. His glare could peel paint. "Are you suggesting," he says slowly, "that America can cross the Pacific at will?" The staff room goes silent. Because the truth is terrifying. If one B-17 could reach Hokkaido, then 100 could reach Tokyo. The Dakota Queen continues its lonely push south, the bomber now running parallel to a bank of low clouds rolling in from the west. The men welcome the cover. Flying inside cloud is disorienting and dangerous, but being visible to Japanese fighters is worse. Hale dips the bomber into the mist. Instantly, the world becomes nothing but white, the cockpit turning into a glowing fog chamber. Ro grips the control column like it's the last solid object left in existence. "Easy," Hale murmurs. "Trust the instruments. Don't trust your eyes." Ro's inner ear tilts. Feels like they're banking even when they're level. He fights the instinct to correct. Behind them, the crew hunkers down. Frost forms on faces, guns, equipment, anything exposed to the freezing, moisture-laden air. In the belly tunnel, Lewis Grant curls his gloved fingers, trying to get blood back into them. He's still thinking about the Key 27 he downed. They'd locked eyes for a split second before the fighter fell away. Grant can't shake that image. Kid looked younger than me, he mutters. Delmar, sitting nearby, nods slowly. They're all somebody's kid. The bomber yawns slightly as turbulence rocks them. Loose casings clatter across the floor. A thermos rolls in a lazy arc. Hale steadies the aircraft with gentle pressure on the yoke. We'll break out of this cloud soon, he says. Then it's open ocean. Then what? Vickers asks. Hale doesn't sugarcoat it. Then we pray the weather holds and the engines keep turning. Hours later, they do break from the clouds, emerging into a vast expanse of shimmering water and blazing sun. No fighters, no flak, just ocean. The tension aboard the fortress doesn't vanish, but it loosens, like a rope drawn too tight finally easing its grip. Roe rolls his neck, sighing. Feels like we've been flying for a year. Only 11 more hours to go, Ortiz says flatly. Groans echo through the interphone. But even as the crew begins to settle into the rhythm of the return flight, a new reality takes shape. One that none of them can see, but all of them can feel. Japan will respond. They have to. The existence of the flying fortress forces them to. And somewhere in the corridors of Tokyo's military command, decisions are being made, decisions that will reshape Japan's air defense strategy, redirect resources, and spark a desperate race to build interceptors that can challenge the B-17 at altitude. The flying fortress has just rewritten the rules of the Pacific War, and the men aboard the Dakota Queen are flying straight into the next chapter, whether they know it or not. By the time the Dakota Queen crests the horizon of the Northern Pacific, news of the raid has rippled through the Japanese high command like wildfire. In Tokyo, generals and admirals huddle over maps illuminated by a single swinging bulb, the air thick with cigarette smoke and tension. The once confident officers now speak in whispers, each word laced with disbelief. For engines, 40 miles out of reach, mutters Lieutenant Colonel Saito, pointing at a crude diagram of the B-17. They flew all the way from the Aleutians, straight to Hokkaido, and back. A junior officer shuffles uneasily, adjusting his uniform. Sir, the Americans, they've demonstrated flight endurance we never accounted for. Our fighters, none of them can maintain altitude long enough to intercept. Saito slams a fist on the table. Then we must develop something that can. Faster, higher, more firepower. We cannot allow this again. And so begins the first seeds of panic-fueled innovation. Japan had relied on complacency, assuming its distance and early victories would shield the homeland. That assumption shattered in a single morning, as one Dakota Queen returned unscathed. Meanwhile, above the endless blue, the fortress crew knows none of this. They are consumed by their own survival, checking instruments, scanning the horizon, listening for the telltale engine whine of enemy fighters. The Pacific is vast, but its emptiness offers no comfort. One miscalculation, one storm, one mechanical failure, and they could be gone forever. Delmar leans over the bomb site once more, now empty and locked, his hands numb from the cold. It's strange, he murmurs. We were supposed to drop bombs, but in a way, we dropped doubt into their heads instead. Grant, tightening the straps on his harness, chuckles quietly. And fear, don't forget fear. You could see it in the way those Key 27s moved. Hesitation, confusion. That's our gift to them today. Hale allows a wry smile but remains focused. Gift or not, we've got a long flight ahead. Engines steady, guys. Don't let up. The crew moves with practiced efficiency, the chaos of combat behind them leaving a tense silence punctuated by the rhythmic hum of the right cyclones. Somewhere beneath the clouds, Japan's new reality is sinking in. One raid, one unstoppable bomber, has forced them to rethink the impossible. Over the following weeks, Japanese intelligence becomes a flurry of reports, photographs, and captured fragments. Reconnaissance planes sweep the northern Pacific routes in desperate attempts to predict American bomber movements. Air defense plans are rewritten. Pilots are retrained to reach altitudes previously considered unnecessary. Factories shift production to high-altitude interceptors and improved anti-aircraft guns. Yet the Americans remain ahead. The B-17, once considered a cumbersome curiosity, has proven its strategic power. Its range, speed, and defensive firepower allow it to strike targets once deemed untouchable. The Dakota Queen's mission was just the first hint of what is to come, a warning shot that shakes confidence and forces a nation into reactive motion. Back aboard the Dakota Queen, hours blur into an endless monotony broken only by instrument checks and quiet conversation. Vickers leans against the fuselage, gazing out the open window at the expanse below. The Pacific stretches to infinity, sun glinting off the waves. "Feels like we've gone farther than any of us thought possible," he says softly. Grady, from his turret, answers with a shrug. "And they'll remember it. That's all that matters." Delmar, still hunched over the empty bomb site, nods. "They'll tell stories about today. Officers and pilots, civilians too. They'll say the Americans have a beast that flies higher than the clouds and never quits." Stone in the tail adds, "And they'll hate it. Oh, they'll hate it." Hale listens quietly to his crew, feeling a rare swell of pride. They had been part of something greater than themselves, an aircraft proving its worth not in theory, but in fire, steel, and courage. But pride is tempered by caution. He knows that one successful raid does not make a war won. Japan will adapt. It will regroup. And the next time the Dakota Queen or any fortress returns, the skies may be far more dangerous. Hale closes his eyes briefly, letting the vibration of the engines ground him. "We've shown them the future," he says softly. "Now it's our job to survive it." The sun begins its slow descent, casting golden light across the cockpit windows. Shadows stretch across the frozen faces of the crew, highlighting fatigue, relief, and determination. For a brief moment, the weight of history seems lighter. But somewhere far below, Japan is plotting, counting, preparing to make sure the next fortress doesn't leave their skies unchallenged. And the men aboard the Dakota Queen know this. The war is just beginning, and the skies above Japan will never be the same again. Previous section text continues seamlessly from where this left off. The Dakota Queen drifts further south, engines humming like a heartbeat over the open Pacific. Crew members move with quiet efficiency, each action deliberate, each glance scanning for the slightest disturbance on the horizon. Silence reigns, but it is a taut silence, electric, edged with adrenaline and the memory of earlier combat. Captain Hale leans against the co-pilot's seat, rubbing his face through the frost. "This is only the beginning," he murmurs. "They laughed at the fortress. Today, they feared it." Indeed, fear is now the prevailing emotion in Tokyo and across Japan. Intelligence officers pore over sketches of the B-17, trying to deduce weaknesses, weapon ranges, and maximum altitudes. Every report from pilots who glimpse the aircraft is dissected, compared, and recalculated. The Japanese had been confident that geography, complacency, and tactical superiority would shield them from direct attacks. They had laughed at the notion that America could strike the home islands with heavy bombers. That laughter has vanished. Inside the Dakota Queen, the crew senses their mission's significance beyond the bombs dropped. Sergeant Miles Grady peers through his turret glass, studying the faint horizon line where ocean meets sky. "They'll rebuild. They'll adapt. But we've made them doubt," he says. His voice is quiet, thoughtful, almost reverent. "That hesitation, the split second we had at Hokkaido, that's what counts." Delmar, still near the now-empty bomb site, nods. "They'll remember that the flying fortress isn't just big. It's relentless and accurate." Vickers, leaning back against the fuselage, adds wryly, "And it doesn't panic under fire." Stone, tail gunner, smirks through frost-covered goggles. "Trust me, they'll hate that." Hale listens, taking in his crew's words, but he knows the grim truth. For every Ki-27 shot down, a more capable fighter will take its place. For every surprised Japanese officer, an alert one will emerge. And soon, the Pacific skies will be hotter, faster, and more lethal. But for now, the fortress has delivered its message. In Tokyo, the shockwaves reach even the highest levels of military command. The Japanese High Command convenes emergency sessions. Maps litter tables, pilots and intelligence officers argue over flight paths, range calculations, and the vulnerabilities of home defenses. Each new piece of information only confirms a bitter reality. Japan cannot ignore the flying fortress. Distance is no longer our defense, one officer says grimly. The Americans have reached our shores, and they can return. Another adds, if one bomber could strike so far north, what stops a fleet of them from reaching central Honshu? Or even Tokyo itself? The generals exchange worried glances. Their early war confidence, built on rapid conquests and perceived superiority, has been shattered by a single raid. Mockery has turned to disbelief. Disbelief has turned to fear. And fear, silent, creeping, and unavoidable, now dominates planning rooms across the country. Back in the Dakota Queen, hours of flight blend into one long, tense march across the sky. Crew members check gauges, oil levels, and engine temperature, each touch and glance a silent ritual of survival. Outside, the sun sinks toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the fuselage. The Pacific sparkles below like a field of molten steel, beautiful and merciless. Hale finally allows himself a deep breath, voice low and steady. We've done our part. The rest is up to history. Delmar leans back, staring at the clouds below. They won't forget this day. Not ever. Vickers cracks a rare grin. And every time they see a fortress, they'll remember what fear looks like at 24,000 feet. Stone chimes in. Tailgunner still alert. They'll train harder, build faster planes. But the fortress will be waiting. Hale looks out over the vast expanse of ocean, eyes narrowing against the glare. And we'll keep flying. Every time they think they've closed the distance, we'll show them the same thing. Range, power, precision. The Dakota Queen cuts across the endless sky, a lone steel sentinel, carrying a story of audacity, firepower, and the raw reality of war. Japan may rebuild, adapt, and retaliate, but the day of mockery is over. The flying fortress has arrived. And from this point forward, the Japanese understand one undeniable truth. The B-17 is not just a bomber. It is a weapon of psychological warfare, a symbol of American reach, and a harbinger of change. The home islands are no longer untouchable. And every man in the sky above Japan now faces a new reality. Underestimating the flying fortress comes at a price. The Dakota Queen flies on, engines roaring, leaving frozen clouds and shattered assumptions behind. In its wake, it carries more than bombs. It carries the seeds of fear, doubt, and the knowledge that the war has entered a new, high-altitude dimension. The Dakota Queen finally begins its long glide toward the Aleutian airfields, engines humming in measured rhythm as the sun dips beneath the horizon. Inside, the crew sits in exhausted silence, letting the tension bleed out slowly, though the knowledge of what they've accomplished hangs heavier than any fatigue. Captain Hale studies the worn leather seat in front of him, thinking back to the moment they first spotted the coastline of Hokkaido. He recalls the glinting black lines of rails, the frozen fields, and the terrified faces of the soldiers who had seen this lumbering giant descend from the clouds. The mockery of the flying fortress, dismissed as an overblown rumor, a bluff of Western propaganda, had turned into disbelief and disbelief into terror. Every man aboard understands the unspoken truth. This flight was not just a strike against infrastructure. It was a message delivered thousands of feet above the frozen earth. America could reach Japan. And when it did, nothing would be the same. Across Japan, the implications of the raid ripple outward. Commanders hastily revise air defense plans. Factories shift to prioritize high-altitude interceptor production. Pilots undergo grueling retraining programs to reach performance ceilings previously considered unnecessary. The first strike of the B-17 has forced the nation into a reactive stance, and history shows that reactive positions are often vulnerable. In the months following the raid, the flying fortress becomes more than an aircraft, it becomes a symbol. Soldiers, sailors, and civilians alike whisper its name with a mixture of awe and dread. Flying Fortress enters the Japanese lexicon as a threat, a reminder that distance no longer equals safety, and technology no longer bows to arrogance. Back on board the Dakota Queen, the crew begins to exchange stories quietly, recounting moments that could have ended their mission at any second. Grady talks about the split-second maneuver that saved the tail from a Ki-27 attack. Vickers recounts the precision of the bombs as they found the rail junction. Delmar leans against the cold metal wall, reflecting on the frozen landscape and the human faces below, their fear and disbelief forever etched in memory. Hale, ever the commander, watches his men with pride tempered by the knowledge of risk. Every mile flown, every burst of machine gun fire returned, and every bomb dropped has reinforced one undeniable fact. The Flying Fortress has changed the rules of engagement in the Pacific. In Washington, the mission's success reaches the War Department. The press is informed, carefully worded, though few details are released. Strategic planners note the significance. Japan now knows the United States has long-range capabilities. The fortress's first strike has demonstrated not only the technical achievement of four-engine bombers, but also the psychological warfare they can wield. Morale in the American ranks soars. The Flying Fortress is no longer just a plane. It is a weapon of inspiration, endurance, and intimidation. By the time the Dakota Queen touches down on frozen runways, the Aleutian winds biting at every exposed surface, the crew feels a sense of accomplishment that cannot be measured in statistics or reports. They have not only survived, they have rewritten the narrative of the air war over the Pacific. Hale climbs out of the cockpit, pulling his parka tighter against the biting cold. He looks up at the vast sky, now fading into night, and reflects on the irony. The aircraft the Japanese had laughed at, the so-called lumbering giant, had proven itself unstoppable when wielded with skill, courage, and precision. Today, mockery became fear. Tomorrow, the Pacific skies would never be the same. Delmar, Vickers, Grady, Stone, Ortiz, and the rest of the crew emerge, shivering but alive, carrying with them the knowledge that they were the first to breach what had been considered impenetrable airspace. They have set the precedent, one that will influence the strategies, fears, and calculations of both sides for years to come. Japan's high command continues to work frantically to understand what happened that day, but there is one immutable conclusion: underestimating the Flying Fortress carries consequences. And America has only just begun to reveal the true potential of the B-17. Above all else, the Dakota Queen's mission is remembered not merely as a bombing raid, but as a turning point. It signals the arrival of a new era in aerial warfare, a war defined by precision, endurance, and the unyielding power of American ingenuity. The men of the Dakota Queen, weary but resolute, leave the aircraft behind on the Aleutian runway. They know that their actions will echo far beyond the frozen mountains and into the hearts of men thousands of miles away. The Japanese will rebuild, adapt, and respond, but the message has been delivered. The Flying Fortress is here, and no one can laugh at it again.